Great.
Alright guys, welcome to the lunchtime seminar. I just want to let you know during the seminar, feel free to help yourself with more drinks and snacks and just like start having your lunch. We don't really want to get started. And so David is going to give a presentation. So David is right now MB student at the faculty, and he's also a third-year PhD student at the University of Hong Kong. So he researches people who help teachers and other school stakeholders to change teaching and learning through technology. David personally has 9 years of experience of teaching and coordinating technology in secondary schools and universities in Hong Kong and also in the United States. He lives at Peaceful and he likes to visit running and encouraging people. So now I'm going to pass it to David. So welcome.
If you want to learn a bit more about me, the name of this presentation and the title of my MPhil thesis is So What Do You Do? Exploring Professional Identities of Pedagogical Technologists in Schools. I'm really thankful that you guys are here, and I'm also thankful that I have an hour too. I think this will be like the longest presentation I've given ever. And so, like distance running, I think pacing will be important. I'll do my best to kind of get through these and also provide a lot of time for discussion and questions and answers. Thank you for your feedback as well. All right, let's talk about backgrounds to all of this. So, ultimately, my research question for this thesis is what are the professional identities of pedagogical technologists in schools in Asia? And I feel like this is an okay scope for a research question at the MPhil level. You'll notice plural identities, technologists, plural as well, and then I kind of contextualize it a bit in schools in Asia. I'll start unpacking what these terms mean. I'll start with pedagogical technologists, and then I'll get to this part in the methodology section, and then this part in the literature review. Okay, let's talk about pedagogical technologists. I made up this word, and part of the problem in studying these people is not having a clear mental model of what they are, right? So, for example, when I say the word teacher, you have this idea in your head, right? And then when I say the word student, you have this idea in your head. And then when I even say the word like technician or principal, you have these things in your head. You have these preconceived notions, right, that come from this continuity in education, particularly with these established roles. So what happens when we have new roles? You know, a new kind of animal in the jungle. Basically, we have to do our best to make sense of this new animal from what already exists, the other animals in the jungle. Okay? So I purposely use this picture just so you don't have any preconceived notions of what's underneath the mask. All right, who are these masked people? For my study, I define a pedagogical technologist as someone who is not a teacher in a traditional sense. That is, this person does not have a content area, or like a content area specialist in maths or science. This person does not teach. This person actually doesn't have a timetable. The jargon is this person is off table, doesn't have a timetable. This person isn't assigned like a grade level, like year 1, year 2 to teach. This person isn't assigned a class, like class A in year 1, all right? So this person is not a teacher in a traditional sense, but this person may teach. The person is also not a technician, because technicians deal with the technical aspect of teaching through technology. Installing, maintaining, repairing equipment, things break down. This pedagogical technologist does not do that. Okay? The scope of the pedagogical technologist's work, for my study, and this is unique in all the literature, is these are school-based technology integration specialists. Now, in the United States and in the UK, maybe, there are district-level technologists, people who are given a stable of schools, several schools, to work with, one person, several schools, but we're talking about one person, one school. Not even one school, but maybe even one section of the school. All right, so these people are very, very unique. All right, my experience. Again, as Tim was saying, I was a teacher for several years. I was also an IT coordinator while being a teacher. You may be familiar with this IT coordinator role, if not the title, because what I was a full-time teacher, and then the additional responsibility was supporting the pedagogical aspect of teaching through technology, as well as the technical aspect too. All right, so this is a more traditional, familiar role in schools, where you have this teacher, and this teacher is like the techie person. You give them a title, and then you just kind of increase their workload. All right, basically. So that was me. And then, when I was a first-year PhD student in 2010, and I was struggling to find something to study, right? I was just kind of storming for a long time. And, you know, my supervisor kept, like, introducing me to these people, all right? And I'm not using any established role. He kept introducing me to these special people who worked in these international schools in Hong Kong. And I was just talking to them, and you know, ultimately I went to this conference where they and people like them went, and then I was hearing about their roles, and I was hearing about the schools from which they came, and like these sounded like fantastic people, like extraordinary people from extraordinary schools. And I realized like this pedagogical technologist, like I'd never heard of it before. All right, and so that was where all of this research started. All right, my own teaching background, my own technology background, and then stumbling upon these people and realizing, wow, I have no idea who these people are. They just came out of the woodwork. Okay, let's talk about the literature review. And again, I need to review some things, right, for my research question, to actually arrive at the research question. And so I review pedagogical technologists and more generally change in schools and the development of roles to support change in schools. And of course I also take a look at professional identity, whatever that is. Okay, so what did I discover? In brief, literature gaps. All right, specific roles to support technology integration in schools. The literature in this is only emerging, right? As people become more aware of technology integration, as people become more aware of school change, and as people become more aware of technological change to aid school change, then people are becoming more aware of the actual specific roles to support technological change and ultimately school change. Right? And so the literature in this is just beginning to emerge. There really isn't any literature at all on pedagogical technologists per the scope of my research. There is some research, again, at district level, but not school-based, school-embedded specialists. Now, there's a lot of literature on, like, for example, instructional designers who are like pedagogical technologists, but they work in higher education, right? And again, in the Western literature, there is research on these people at district levels, right? But nothing school-based. And even, I'll get to this in a moment, like, trying to find literature on pedagogical technologists is really, really difficult, and I'll show you in a moment why. Okay? Professional identities for these technology integration personnel in schools is, it doesn't really exist. I mean, even professional identity literature for like teachers and more established roles has only been taking off in the past like 20 years. All right? And then I'll get to this. It's not, from my reading, it wasn't very clear from this research on established roles what is, in fact, what influences professional identity. A lot of these studies don't make this clear. Okay. Going back to school change, there are a lot of frameworks for school change and technological change in schools. We can see that a lot of schools focus on the physical, the infrastructure, and that's really, really important. I think that's the first step, is actually getting things in here. And then using the things is the second step, and then using the things to actually do things that weren't possible before, I think is a good third step. All right, and as we have this kind of spectrum, as the literature kind of presents this kind of spectrum of change, well, it's not very clear the kinds of roles that coincide with these changes. This is all just kind of my conjecture. So schools have like teachers, and then when you have like computers in schools, you need technicians, right, to install things, right? And they break, so you need to fix them, so you need a technician. And then people start actually using these computers, and like, how can we actually do things with these computers? Well, then one of these smart teachers, techie teachers, is like, oh, we can do this, and then we give them a role. That person becomes an IT coordinator. But then ultimately, maybe the school actually has a whole school plan for change, right? A real vision for change, and they realize, wait, we actually need more than just this guy. We need a guy who's relieved of her or his workload and can just be full-time support. Let's change teaching and learning in our school. All right, so that's the way I think it goes in practice. That's actually why I'm doing the research. We don't actually know if we can have a pedagogical technologist with a school that just bought a bunch of stuff and doesn't have a whole school plan for change. And we actually don't know that yet. So this is just some of the funny stuff that I made like 3 years ago. You know, the technological evolution of school staff. Sometimes you have teachers, and you have technicians, and you have IT coordinator, and you have pedagogical technologists. And then what else? You know, I was talking to one of my research participants, and she said, my work, I would say that my work would be successful if I obviate myself, if I no longer need it. If all the teachers can innovate and sustain change in their teaching and learning practices, they won't need me anymore. And I think that's a job well done. But, I mean, again, this is just conjecture. It's just something that she said, and I just kind of threw it in here. Okay. Again, there's not too much literature on pedagogical technologists. Just to compare, we have learning technologists. We find them generally in higher education in the UK. We have IT coordinators. Again, you might be more familiar with that. That's a more mainstream role. And again, they're like educational technologists. I think they're called that in the United States. But again, they're like district-level personnel. And now I'll get to why it was hard to do the literature review. Okay, it's hard to do the literature review because we don't have a term. That's the problem. Because it's an emergent role and the mental model is not stable enough, we cannot just type in teacher and get all the literature. Right? What exactly is the search term that I use? And so, learning technologists came across, educational technologists came across, instructional designer came across, IT coordinator came across, pedagogical technologist does not exist. But this cloud is in fact a bunch of job titles. And the crazy thing about my study is that in my PhD study, I studied 5 people, right, 5 cases. They all have different job titles. And in my MPhil study, I'm studying 3 people. They all have different job titles. And that's the cool thing, and it's the dangerous thing. Now, the cool thing is we're trying to make sense of all of these job titles. Learning technology advisor, learning technology coordinator, what's the difference? What's the difference between a digital literacy coach and a digital literacy leader? Because people in schools actually have these job titles. What's the difference between a head of teaching and learning technologies and an ICT curriculum leader? Is there a difference? All right, so there's a lot to explore in making sense of all of these job titles. But the dangerous thing is trying to make generalizations. And actually that's a big problem in a lot of the previous studies, is that people have tried to actually study these people through like surveys, for example, but there's no way to verify that the animal that you are trying to study is in fact the animal. Because if the animal doesn't have any idea of what it is, well, how can you validate these kinds of things? So a lot of surveys have gone out to technology integration people. There's actually no way of telling whether or not that person, in fact, is the appropriate sample for your study. Right? You might get an IT coordinator filling in a survey for a pedagogical technologist, but there's no way that you can actually study if this IT coordinator, in fact, is a pedagogical technologist. That's why case study is really, really important for this area right now, because you actually need to collect evidence to prove that the dog is a dog. Right? We can't just assume, because the mental model isn't stable, we can't just assume that whoever you send this survey to, that you haven't met before, who has to self-identify himself or herself, in fact knows what you're talking about. Right. So that's actually a problem in doing research with these people right now. Okay. Oh goodness, wow, sorry, I'm not pacing well. Okay, let's just go to professional identity right now. These are just some of the things that I've been going through. Professional identity is just this loaded term like technology. People just kind of throw it around, but we can come up with very different conclusions because we share different assumptions about what it means. So it's very important that we actually define the term, the scope of the term. I went through teachers, professors, instructional designers, and academic librarians' literature on professional identities. For these people, why? Because again, pedagogical technologists, professional identity doesn't exist. The research doesn't exist yet. And I feel like there are similarities between this literature and the literature that I'm undertaking because it's in the context of schools and school change. Okay. One thing that I noticed from these kinds of studies and then other meta-reviews of these studies is that oftentimes people do not clarify what professional identity is, and then they do not clarify what influences professional identity. And I think a lot of researchers just ignore it. If we just ignore, if it's too hard to define what exactly it is and what goes into it and influences it, we just kind of focus on one thing and just ignore everything else. So that's something that I kind of noticed in other authors who review these professional identity studies have concluded. Okay. Another issue is also just comparing professional identity. If we're all using different definitions for professional identity, how can we actually compare studies? How can we establish consensus of what professional identity is? In fact, we can't. All right. So my purpose in my study is, well, I need a definition. Let me just make it coherent for my study and cohesive for my study, that it makes sense and it's clear. All right. I'm adding to this conversation on professional identity research and education. Something that's important that I noticed was that professional identity is social, it's situated, and negotiated. All right. That means professional identity involves people, it involves a particular context, and it involves not authority. Well, no, social power matters, but it involves making meaning together. All right. In a particular context, and in addition, this whatever identity emerges, it has to be performed and has to be recognized. Okay, so for example, I would think that you guys are like an audience, right? Because we are interacting in a way that suggests a mental model of audience, and I am like a speaker. All right. Right now, we are not necessarily teachers or students. We are more like a speaker and an audience, right? Because of this particular situation right now. All right, and then outside, or after this presentation, it's going to change. Okay? What about professional identity? Well, it's complex, all right? And there are a lot of variables. It's always changing because the people are always changing. The contexts are always changing. There's tension as well in making meaning of anything, right? There's a degree of tension because we are not alike, right? And what is in our heads, these things are not the same. So we bring different things to the table. And of course, professional identity is very personal, especially to the person to whom the identity is attributed. Okay. Okay, let's talk about significance. Why is this study significant? It's exploratory and small scale. All right, so again, we don't know too much about what's going on. The existing theory isn't really there. So this small-scale research is helping to explore. And it's important that we increase awareness of these people in general in schools, because this might be the future of schools. Maybe 15 months from now, 15 years, 150 years from now. Maybe more schools, in fact, more schools are employing these pedagogical technologists, I know, and actually that's the reason why I got into this research, is because people wanted to make sense of this. So it's important that we know about this. Right? Okay. Whoa, hello. Again, there's an imbalance between, we already know a lot about teachers, but it's significant that we also learn about professional identities of these people in these schools. Okay. And going back to what I said, we can learn a lot about, hello, does it? Oh, wow, it's like that. We can learn a lot of practical knowledge through these kinds of studies about how schools are changing through technology. We can learn a lot about the narrative of how schools are changing. Because again, the emergence of this role suggests a different way of thinking, right? Going back to this idea of, for example, we all have money in our wallets, all right? And the way we use our money indicates the way we think about things. Now, all schools have money, So why don't all schools have these roles? It's because some schools use their money to say, okay, we got some cash, let's buy some more textbooks. Okay, we've got some cash, so let's just buy some more teachers or secretaries and just create more work. And then there are some schools in their context are saying, okay, well, let's actually just employ someone not to be a teacher anymore. Right? So this helps us to think about specific ways that schools think as organizations about technological change. And again, this might be the future for schools. Local significance. My research participants, they get to think, and they get to reflect, and they get to be healed, I hope. It's tough, as my findings suggest. And again, this study emerged from my PhD work, and just feeding back my PhD work, people really want to know what's going on with these people. Who are these people in these schools? And so we want to help schools to develop appropriate practice and policy, even as regards to job titles, job description, professional development, or context support for these people in schools. Okay, theoretical framework. I reviewed all the literature, and I came up with this thing, all right? This thing to understand what's going on. All right, my study, the scope of my study is this: the work context and everything inside. My supervisors here, my supervisors are Sarah Hennessy and Paul Warwick. They suggested that I just kind of acknowledge that this thing outside exists, and it influences ultimately professional identity. It does. Okay. So we have some entities in the global context. I separate what I'm studying, the factors that influence professional identity are here and here. And ultimately, what I define professional identity as, is what a person does in practice. Okay, what a person performs and is recognized. Okay, so what influences what a person does in practice? It's the people around you and what they bring to the table, and it's the other stuff, the psychic stuff or the physical stuff, like that and that and that, and the notices and procedures. All these things impact what we do in practice. Okay, so the work context. Professional organizations, codes of practice, job description, performance appraisal, professional development, other resources, requirements and regulations, curriculum, qualifications. This came from a literature review of those more established roles in schools. All right. The social, what do people bring to the table? What's inside people's heads that influence professional identity? Hello. Hey. Okay. Beliefs, values, and assumptions, attitudes, expectations, experiences, social power and status, knowledge, and expertise. Okay, one, there's a problem. These are not necessarily discrete units. I just make them discrete units. Again, we're dealing with complexity. There's a lot of overlap between a lot of things. All right, but I'm trying my best to make things discrete so that we understand what's going on. That's a problem with the research, right? Just trying to make things discrete and trying to make things clear. Also self-identities, sorry. So that's those are the factors that came across in my literature review of these established roles. This framework is not set in stone, right? This helps me to understand what's going on. Some of these factors may be more prominent in the data that I collect than others. And then maybe there are some other factors that I haven't seen yet to emerge from the data to influence professional identity, and then I'll have to change this framework a bit. Okay? So it's grounded to an extent. All right? This is not grounded theory, but it's grounded to an extent. Okay. Methodology. Let's go back to this research question. So I've kind of gone through professional identities. pedagogical technologists. I'll talk about the sample quickly. Oh, wow, I had sub-questions too. You can just read those while I take a drink. All right, and then I have some deliverables. I want to aim to do things. Wowja. Okay. What is this? Here we are. What does it say? Oh, to what degree is there statistical generalization in my research? Oh, that's a good question. There is a lot of analytical generalization in my research. That is, we just know more about pedagogical technologists. We know more about their professional identities. But can we actually apply my research to all pedagogical technologists around the world? Of course not. There actually is a degree of statistical generalization, though, because there are so few pedagogical technologists in the world, and because they are in a certain area, and I'm actually studying these people, we can actually make, to a degree, statistical generalization. For example, I'm studying 5 pedagogical technologists in Hong Kong. There may be at most maybe 50 of them. So in Hong Kong. So to a degree there is statistical generalization, but right now we're just exploring things and making analytical generalizations. So each case is, you can consider a separate experiment, a social experiment, a school's experiment in having one of these people. So that's one of the reasons why I'm using case study research approach. We need to study these people in depth, just to create more knowledge. And also, going back to what I said about some previous studies into these people, we actually can't tell if that person really is, the dog is really a dog. All right, that's actually a real problem. All right, project timeline. I'm going to be spending 2 months on the preliminary stage. That's over with. I'm spending 3 months from now until January collecting data and analyzing data. And then I'm going to spend 6 months just chilling from February to July, just writing everything up. Okay. So what have I done already? I reviewed some literature. I kind of understood the context and contextualized what's going on. I found my sample. It's a convenient sample. I actually knew 2 of the people beforehand, and I could access them, so it was convenient. It was a snowball sample in the sense that these people helped me to find my 3rd primary research participant. I also want to interview the other people who have helped these people, these 3 pedagogical technologists, to negotiate their professional identities. But I don't know who they are. See, that's the whole thing. So I actually need to collect data from these people first and look at a few documents to see who are the other players who have helped these pedagogical technologists negotiate their professional identity. So in that sense, it's a snowball and theoretical sample, right? So I actually have to collect some data first, and then find out who are the other prominent people that I need to talk to figure out ultimately. Oh, hello. Going back here. I actually don't know who these people are yet. Hey, back here. I don't know who these people, hello, these people are. I actually don't know who the other important people are who have helped to negotiate professional identity in schools. I actually don't know. I could guess, but I need to get it from the data. Hello, okay. All right. So from that preliminary stage, got some research problems and questions, conceptual framework, research instruments, ethical approval. Did all that. Okay. What did I just do? I actually just started collecting data this week. I interviewed one of my research participants and was piloting for these things. I wanted to check to make sure that my research questions are understandable. All right, in what way do I actually need to change the wording? I wanted to also check the order in which I ask questions as well. And so I have to change the order after piloting. And I also want to figure out how long is it going to take, because I didn't want to have these interviews take more than an hour. All right. So I actually interviewed yesterday and was transcribing things today at the writing group, and so I was thinking about that. Okay, data collection. In general, I'm going to be, what I plan is a first set of interviews with these pedagogical technologists, the 3 of them, this month, and we're going to do it through Skype. And I'm screencasting them as well, so I'm actually making a video recording of our conversation, so it's just easier for me to transcribe. And from that, and also looking at documents, I'm going to be asking for certain documents, and even some of the pedagogical technologists have given me some documents that I think are very important in course assignments. Then we're going to determine who we need to talk to next. All right? So I'm going to follow up with these pedagogical technologists, maybe ask some different questions in January when I go back to Hong Kong for that conference that I went to. And then, hopefully, I have a feeling some of these important people will also be there too. And that's not a coincidence either, right? That they're actually going to come with pedagogical technologists to this conference. And then, hopefully, I'll be able to talk to them there as well. I haven't thought about how I'm going to talk to them yet. I was talking to my supervisor. She was saying maybe focus groups as opposed to individual interviews. But there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages with these focus groups. And I'm not sure I have time to explain that. So I'm thinking about how best to actually collect data at the conference. Okay, from my primary research participants, the pedagogical technologists, and these other people, the other important people. I'm also presenting at the conference too. I present every year. All right, and actually, after that presentation last year, this research project was born. Because people came up to me and were like, David, these are some of the problems that we're facing right now in our schools. Can you help to make sense of this? And that's how actually I got 2 of these research participants on board. Okay, data analysis. Oh, hello. No. Okay, at this point, I already have these factors. You've seen my theoretical framework. So I'm doing some deductive coding with NVivo initially. And again, the framework is grounded to an extent in data, and there could be changes to the framework depending on what emerges. I'm looking for prominent qualities, which factors are more significant than others, illustrative quotations, the right data to back it up, again, grounded in the data, and what things are beneficial or detrimental, right? Qualities, even amongst the prominent qualities, which ones tend to be are viewed as beneficial and which are detrimental. Validity and reliability. What did I mean by this? Okay, going back to the validity of my study. Is a pedagogical technologist a pedagogical technologist? I think there's actually a lot of conceptual validity there because I'm doing a case study. I can actually collect evidence because I have this definition of pedagogical technologist, and I can collect evidence to actually say that a pedagogical technologist is a pedagogical technologist, right? And that's the problem with a lot of others, especially survey research. You say that you're researching these pedagogical technologists in a survey, but you have no proof that that person actually is a pedagogical technologist, right? Because there's self-selection out there. And if a person doesn't know what a pedagogical technologist is, well, then it throws everything, it creates problems. Okay, so I'm going to be triangulating data within, for example, even an interview, just to make sure that things are consistent. Also, the factors that emerge, I'm checking between instances of data collection. For example, she says this, she says that, probably the same thing. If not, why not? And then, between cases, when I start making generalizations, analytical generalizations about pedagogical technologists, well, in this case, this happened. In this case, this happened. If they're the same, good. If not, why not? And I'm using a lot of participant checking. So after transcribing, I take notes, and I feed back the transcription and the notes to my research participants who are involved. And then they check it, and then oftentimes there's clarification, and then an opportunity for further discussion as well. It's good just to feed back what I think, just so, again, we can make things more agreeable. All right? So participant checking is very, very important. Okay. So ultimately, for 6 months, I'll be analyzing these things, and then looking at the analytical generalizations, what can we learn, and then meeting my aims. Okay, a few final things. Data storage. Wow, I learned a hard lesson from my PhD project. I was recording things on my Samsung Galaxy S2, and then one day I decided to switch phones. Okay, this Galaxy S2 sucks. I need a 4S. But I forgot to back up the data on my Galaxy S2 because it doesn't do it automatically. So I ended up losing a lot of interview data there. Thankfully, with the iPhone, it automatically backs things up when you plug it in. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. So I'm trying to be more mindful of data storage, securing things, but also actually making things accessible. So what I've been doing with my PhD MPhil project is actually storing a lot of things on Google services, making it accessible only to me and my research participants. And we agreed upon the types of data storage as well, right? Because even some people might not say, hey, I don't want my things on the cloud, But these people, progressive, are saying, hey, it's okay, I use Google services as well, it's okay to send me things that way. Informed consent, wow. It's a lot easier to do research here than at the University of Hong Kong, because at the University of Hong Kong we have an IRB, have to go through all these paperwork hoops. But here it's like, wow, we just show them something. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I really like that. Scope. Well, I don't even remember what I wrote about scope. I'll have to check it later. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
General questions. I'm trying to form in my own head. Now you have a concept of what teacher is and technician is. I'm now trying to do the same for pedagogical technology, unfortunately. And I started to think, what qualifications and experience would you consider? I mean, I know it's early on, you haven't asked me this yet, but would you consider someone to be a pedagogical technologist? Because what I was thinking with that title is you've got to have the pedagogy is implying some kind of a teaching and learning type background, and the technologist is the IT. So I could have a job description that said I was a pedagogical technologist, but I may not actually be one, even though the job description described that, based on how you define eventually what a pedagogical technologist is. If that makes sense. Sort of a comment and a question.
You're asking about the qualifications and experience of these people.
Yeah, what is your expectation, or what would you have to have? Because you could be a teacher, but not necessarily technology. Because when I read your abstract, I actually thought you were talking about somebody in industry that was an IT computer geek that had come into school and was offering their IT knowledge. I've seen pedagogists now, and that's exactly who you're referring to.
Okay.
So I'm trying to, in my own head, think what qualification and experience would I need. Is if I wanted to become a pedagogist.
Good, okay.
Yeah,
All right, here we go.
yeah,
Okay, here we go. All
I'm
right.
not saying that, but that's kind of in my head what you would consider.
All right, I'm trying to find that out. In
Right.
fact, I asked that in my interview yesterday,
Right.
and the experiences vary. Each person, as a unique case, is different. Some of the people came from teaching backgrounds.
That's the pedagogical part of the
Yes.
right.
Everyone has an interest in technology. But like, for example, my superstar friend, she was an agricultural surveyor. That was her first degree. And then she failed the charter exam and was like, okay, well, I realize I don't have a passion for that. I do have a passion for technology. So she got her PGCE. And then she went to a school. And she was a teacher there, like a specialist teacher, like a computer teacher there. All right. And then she was starting to explore with technology in teaching and learning. And then she went to another school which gave her even more freedom to explore technology in teaching and learning. And then she went to her penultimate destination, where she was fully off timetable and supported full-time the pedagogical aspect of teaching through technology. So the qualifications, she says her undergraduate degree was just, it didn't matter. All right? Her master's mattered. With my other research assistant, the master's degree really matters as well. Did I start answering your question?
I think so. So are you saying that they definitely would have to have some teaching experience? A lot of people can naturally just gravitate to IT like she has,
Yes.
actually, hasn't she?
Yes.
She hasn't got the background for IT.
Yes.
But she's comfortable with it.
Yes.
And now she's going to apply that. But do they have to have a teaching background for the pedagogical part?
I think all of them have had a teaching background. And all of them have clear beliefs, values, and assumptions about education and learning as well.
Right.
So I was away for a little while, so I was not sure if anybody has asked this question, but did you mention that pedagogical technologist is a term that is coined by you? Or, yeah? So I was wondering, like, the term itself might presuppose certain aspects of identity already.
Yes.
You're studying professional identity, and have you considered the relationship between professional identity and personal identity, and perhaps other aspects of identity? Because there may be some overlapping.
Yes. Hello. Hello. There is a lot of overlap. And we're in a complex system, and we're trying to make sense of this overlap. And I recognize that people have many identities, right? And they are in constant negotiation with themselves. What am I at this moment right now? People recognize me as so many things in this life and in this world. What am I right now standing before you, right? And so there are competing identities, and I'm trying my best to recognize that. Of course, the personal identities influence ultimately what happens, this professional identity, what a person does in practice in the context of work. And again, there can be many professional identities. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, but I was sort of thinking like the fact that you created this term. I mean, you sort of have. Do you think you have to acknowledge your assumptions about people who are taking on this role or taking on this job?
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise it's like I mean, it's a little bit like assumed and, you know,
Oh, yes, I have.
pedagogical, like
Yes,
what
of
you're
course.
talking about. Like, you have to have pedagogic training or background in order to be able to show this title.
Yes, of course. This is my turn, and I do my best to implicate myself as to my background and as to why I came up with, this term over here. I just need a term. Otherwise, I would be dealing with this. What exactly do I call these people? And that's a problem, because we all need to actually start making sense of this. We can't keep dealing with a cloud of things. The schools and the people in the schools can't keep dealing with the cloud. And that's actually why this project was born. So I just use this word pedagogical technologist. In the literature, there's no consensus either. And that's a problem too. Again, we go back to this idea of instructional designers or learning technologists or educational technologists or this or that. And there's no consensus on this either, other than it's vague. Yeah. So I'm doing my best to implicate myself in why I came up with that term. Okay. You can first. We'll cross. Thank you.
Sorry, so you have said that in different schools they use different terms for the same job position. So does that affect this technologist self-identity?
Yes, it does. It does. And you know what? You know what's really cool? The person that I talked to yesterday doesn't have a job title or a job description. Isn't that so cool?
Can you offer some examples of the interviewees that you have interviewed? What's the difference between their self-identity according to their different job titles?
Okay. I only started collecting data this week, so I can't do that. One person is called the digital literacy coach. That's his official title. Another person doesn't have a job title. So.
They must be employed. They must have something. Maybe it's not a job title to apply for the job in the first place. Something.
The origin story is very special as well. The origin story for all of these people is very, I mean, again, that's why we do cases, right? Because it's not like you just find an ad in the paper and you answer it, you go to the interview, and this happens. No, what happens is generally the right people at the right time. Like you're in the school's making this change, and internally they're looking for this person, and you get nominated. Or, for example, in my other case, you just know this person. Like this person actually is an Apple Distinguished Educator. And so you do a lot of work with Apple, and then Apple kind of lets you out to all of these people. And then, okay, well, this school is looking to do things with iPads. And so this person introduces you to the principal, and then the principal's like, I want you. I'm going to give you a visa and some money. And that's what happens. So origin stories are very different. What was the question?
So you were going to probably tell us about the different identity of the two different people. One has a job title.
Yeah. I will be able to tell you that as I start collecting data. But I do realize that the job, where is it? The job description, which includes the job title, are important. All right. Sorry, can we go to the back? Yeah.
So I'm still not convinced about the term pedagogical technology.
Yeah.
So because I think that there are people that have these roles but don't have the title. So I mean, I can see in my country that there are people that do these things that you're describing, but they have no title. They don't even have a different job than the teaching. So maybe this is one of the reasons why there is no literature on this. because it's something that is emerging and the term is not agreed and
Yes.
and I mean you can have the role but with different anyway. Yeah, the question, this was just a comment. The question is something different. You said that you will be having more participants coming on board on the conference, probably. So what's the plan B if they are not there, or if there is no time to discuss or have an interview or a focus group?
Yes. Well, if they don't actually come, and if I'm not able to meet them there, then we'll do interviews online.
Okay, so you know who these people are?
No, not yet. That's why I actually need to collect the data, right? Because, for example, in one instance, maybe the principal is very, very significant. Maybe in another instance, the principal is not very significant at all. It was like a teacher or some kind of administrator or even like a parent that was very, very significant. And so I have to go through some initial waves or iterations of data collection to figure out who is actually important, right? It's not just like a random sample, right? I need to figure out there are certain people who are more instrumental than other people in the school in impacting what this person does. I mean, ultimately, we could say like everyone impacts what everyone does, but some people are more instrumental than others, and we need to find that out.
Plus your participants, if you're going direct, then you can use your participants to get to them, can't you?
Yes.
Because he has that contact already.
Yes.
You know, like the parent may not want to, but if he's approached by your participants, says,
Yes.
can you help?
Yes.
So you're probably more likely to be able to get the right people.
Yes.
Possible.
And again, these people are very special, and they've always been very willing. And that's something else that I have to kind of keep in mind. They're very much a network type. Yes.
My question is about that, your research question, you talked about schools in Asia. I've taught in Asia, and I taught in international schools, and I'm wondering if there's any, like, which kind of schools are these teachers coming from? And if the schools, just as much as like principals or parents or what have you, are actually enabling these positions, enabling these identities,
Yes.
because they have maybe more flexibility or have, whereas other schools might be more rigid in their options.
Yes. Good point. They all come from international schools. Not just any international schools, but the top international schools. Like the super famous ones. And I've written a journal article about this. There is this kind of, we have to acknowledge the work context, but also the kind of global context in creating this kind of environment where these people can emerge. The kind of marketplace forces and other kinds of external forces. I covered that in my PhD work. I don't cover that here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm afraid we have to stop here. The time limit, but you're most welcome to stay on and to continue that. I'm going to stay